Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fighter Series on Red Corner Boxing, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. And of course, the episode today is none other than the one and only Big George Foreman. As we know, the the iconic Foreman passed away over the weekend at the age of 76. May God rest his soul. I'm aware there's a lot of tributes, so I'm going to go ahead and give mine here today. Born and raised out of Marshall, Texas, joined the Job Corps where he took up boxing under an individual named Nick Doc Brodus, and propelled to an amateur career where in his first amateur fight, he basically powered through his opponent in the first round, and that was basically a sign of the things to come. Because as he powered through the amateur ranks, he represented the United States in the 1968 U.S. Olympic team in Mexico City, and where he powered his way to winning the gold medal in the gold medal round, where he just pummeled the opponent and captured Olympic gold representing the United States. Shortly thereafter, he would turn professional and he would just power his way up the heavyweight ranks, compiling a record of 37-0 with 34 knockouts. Basically, every time he stepped into the ring, one of the more brutal two-fisted power punchers the sport has ever seen. And of course, that set up the giant matchup built as the Sunshine Showdown, January 22nd, 1973, in Kingston, Jamaica, when he fought the great Smokin' Joe Frazier. Pegged as a 3.5-1 underdog and a year and a half removed from Frazier's big win over Muhammad Ali, many thought Foreman didn't have much of a chance, but his power said otherwise, as he just tormented, tortured, and demolished Joe Frazier to the tune of 6 knockdowns in 2 rounds to win the heavyweight championship of the world. And basically, it was so big for him, he was basically carried out of the arena in a victory celebration in a fight where no one thought he would win. Even George Foreman, for as long as he lived, told the whole world he did not expect for him to demolish the great Joe Frazier the way he did, flooring him 6 times in 2 rounds. The last knockdown was courtesy of a right-hand uppercut that picked up a 218-pound Joe Frazier off the canvas. And that basically got him the heavyweight championship of the world, got him 2 successful title defenses, a 1-round knockout of Jose Roman in Venezuela, followed by a 2nd-round knockout over Ken Norton. And of course, it sets up the super event, the most super global event in boxing history. It was October 30th, 1974 in Kinshasa, Zaire, known as the Rumble in the Jungle, where he was pegged as a favorite against the great Muhammad Ali. And in that particular fight, we know the story of this one. Foreman as a favorite, the overall puncher, just had one mission to seek and destroy Ali, which backfired because Ali used his experience, his craftiness, and his tricks to confuse and frustrate Foreman to where in the 8th round when he floored Foreman didn't beat the count, but just when he got up, went straight to his corner, and Ali was crowned the heavyweight champion of the world. And basically, not physically, but more mentally, it messed up Foreman because he was pegged as this invincible force, this immovable object no one could do anything with. And here he is, this big monster, the scary individual who's on the canvas, down for the count against this great Ali. And of course, he would bounce back a couple fights later, and basically, arguably the greatest heavyweight slugfest that took place January 24th, 1976, when he fought Ron Lyle in his first official comeback after the Ali loss. In that particular fight, both fighters were hurt. Both fighters were dropped, especially the end of the 4th round where it looked like Foreman was going to be down and out for the count. Barely beats the count and goes to his corner, but recovers to where he pins Lyle into the corner and just becomes a punching machine to where he pummels Lyle to the canvas, and basically Lyle could not beat the count, and Foreman wins that fight on the count of 10 to where his hand is raised. He would have a rematch with Joe Frazier to where he would do the same thing the second fight as he did the first fight. Basically, Frazier survived for the first 2 rounds till Foreman caught him, and the fight was mercifully stopped at the end of the 5th round in that second fight. Then came the night of 1977 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, when he fought Jimmy Young. And basically a fight where if he wins, he could get the Ali rematch, a rematch that he had been calling for since he beat Ron Lyle. Turns out Jimmy Young does to Foreman what Ali basically did, was basically give him a boxing lesson and prompted Young to the win, which in turn prompted Foreman into his 10-year retirement. Now, and we know the story of the 10-year retirement. Big George, takes up a religion, is a preacher and a minister in a church in Houston, Texas. Also starts up the George Foreman Youth Center. Now it's a different persona. The first incarnation of George Foreman was one that was all about business, mean and nasty. And in the second fight, as you saw in the pictures, he's now the bold guy, the lovable guy that everybody wants to be around. And with the George Foreman Youth Center and the churches, now he starts to embark on his comeback in 1987 at the Arco Arena in Sacramento when he faces Steve Zalski in basically a comeback fight where everybody was laughing because no one thought Foreman would take this thing seriously. Stopped Steve Zalski in 3 rounds to begin the comeback, and he started to reestablish himself as a heavyweight contender despite all of the critics who called Foreman's comeback a laughing matter and a scam artist, a con artist, whatever you want to call it. Foreman basically sold the idea that he can do this, that age 30, 40, and 50 is not a death sentence, and it started at Arco Arena when he beat Steve Zalski. He started climbing up the ranks slowly but surely, beating guys like Dwight Cowie, Burt Cooper, who were respectable opponents and fringe contenders. Then the real one came at 1990, a fight dubbed as a preacher versus a puncher. Foreman fights the brutal punching Jerry Cooney, and he obliterates Cooney in 2 rounds. And now people are really starting to take George Foreman seriously. Next fight, his first top 10 opponent was none other than Jose Adelson Rodriguez on a HBO doubleheader with Mike Tyson. He obliterates Rodriguez in 2 rounds, and basically Foreman's now in the top 10 rankings of the governing bodies. And 2 fights later, in 1991, he finally gets his first shot at the heavyweight championship against Evander Holyfield in a fight billed as the Battle of the Ages, a 13-year age difference, a 48-pound weight difference. Even though Evander Holyfield got the unanimous decision win, and rightfully so because he was an active fighter, George Foreman won over the hearts of all the fans and all the media members that night by hanging in there, having his moments, and basically finding a way to survive the 12-round distance against the outstanding Evander Holyfield. And basically all the laughter about George Foreman's comeback was basically done because his comeback, even though he lost a Holyfield fight, was officially declared a serious matter. And basically he won the night and basically shut a lot of critics up when he went the distance with Evander Holyfield, albeit in a losing effort. Gets another 4-fight winning streak. Then he fights Tommy Morrison in a fight where he, for the first time in his comeback, really showed his age. Morrison didn't let him get off his shots, gets a unanimous decision win. And that was the first time people were really starting to call for George Foreman to hang it up. And of course, during that 10-year of a second comeback, he gets the commentator gig at HBO with the great Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant. As George Foreman was calling fights, a particular night he called was April 22nd, 1994, the first fight between Evander Holyfield and Michael Moore. He wasn't just calling it as a commentator, but he's also calling the fight as a chance to scout who may be his next opponent because he still had the belief he could win the heavyweight championship again. And after Michael Moore beat Evander Holyfield the first time, it was revealed 2 days after that fight by promoter Bob Arum, where George Foreman calls Bob Arum and tells him, by any means necessary, get me the Michael Moore fight. And that stage was set for November 5th, 1994. It was better as the Battle for the Ages, Moore versus Foreman at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Crowd seated 19,000. At least 18,800 were going to cheer for Big George because Foreman had won the hearts of everybody. Continues to build the fight up as he normally does, tell the whole world it's not a death sentence. We can do anything we want to do. And basically a slight underdog, not as big as the other fights, but slightly below 2-1. And some people gave Foreman not more than a puncher's chance against the upstart Moore, who just came off the big win over Holyfield. Looked like the first half of the fight, Michael Moore was going to win. Boxing out of the southpaw stands, the 1-2s, busting George Foreman up blooding his face, swelling his eyes shut. But as the fight wore on, George Foreman started to find a home gradually for the 1-2s, the left jab, right cross, which has been his bread and butter throughout his comeback. And in the 8th round, he started to get to Michael Moore a little bit because of a couple 1-2s and an uppercut, and he pins Michael Moore against the ropes and hurts him. But from the 8th round on, Michael Moore just tries his best he could to avoid George Foreman. But then came the moment in round 10 where Foreman starts off with his 1-2s, starts to find home with his left hooks. Actually, the second one, if you watch it, hits him so hard, Michael Moore starts to lean on George Foreman. And a subtle move as Foreman turned away as he missed, Michael Moore still standing right in front of him. The first 1-2 high in the head, and Michael Moore just stood there stunned. George Foreman later said that right hand was a little high. So what does he do? He lowers the right hand to the point of Michael Moore's chin. The 1-2 on that chin, down goes Michael Moore, down and out for the count. And on November 5th, 1994, 30 and a half years ago, George Foreman's mission to become the oldest heavyweight champion of the world in boxing history was cinched and clinched. He won it by a 10th round knockout on a perfectly placed 1-2 combination that Michael Moore was just down and out. And George Foreman got the last laugh on everyone because he had the belief he could do it. And he basically did it November 5th, 1994, to reach the landmark moment as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Now, of course, the win there sparked off massive endorsements for him. We talk about, of course, the Grill, which is still a global phenomenon. You know, he sold his naming rights to the tune of nearly $200 million at the time and pocketed close to $750,000. It was an enormous number, like $760 million after updated financial calculations to compete with today's financial stability. Of course, the commercials with stuff like Meineke, Pepsi, Doritos, among others, had his own reality show called George. Wrote a couple books about him, about his career, how he was down to the rise up. Still kept his George Foreman Youth Center going in Houston, Texas, and came, of course, the biopic about him, which was released just a couple years ago. It was actually not too long after that. He was on a podcast with former NFL standouts Brandon Marshall and Deshaun Jackson, sharing his story about his life and his career. Had a bunch of cars, a terrific family man who was basically one of the most kind-hearted individuals, and the world lost not just a great fighter, but a terrific human being. And that it will be the legacy of George Foreman, that not only his greatness in the ring, but his greatness outside of it. Probably could argue from his first incarnation to his second incarnation, a real-life celebrity makeover, from his physique as well as his personality. And he made the most of it. And they say live your life to the fullest. You could legitimately say George Foreman certainly did live his life to the fullest. Rest in peace, Big George Foreman. We all love you. Thank you for your service. And that'll wrap up this edition of the Fighter Series on Red Corner Boxing. Hope everyone has themselves a wonderful day. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.